I've been meaning for some time to do a video on tinnitus and the placebo effect. And I actually devoted a whole issue of the newsletter to this topic. So if you want to see or read some more, you might want to go there, but not everyone gets the newsletter. So I want to make sure this information gets out in video format. So the placebo effect is probably known to most folks. It's this capacity of essentially inert medications or procedures to bring about results equal to those of real medications and real procedures. It's been known for thousands of years actually. Research for much less than that, but a very substantial research base. And it's established beyond all reasonable doubt that it is a real thing. Right? And what it testifies to is the capacity of the mind, the power of the mind to bring about little physical changes. So it's quite an interesting phenomenon to speculate about. And in the newsletter, I wrote a lot about Ellen Langer and her research. Her latest book, The Mindful Body, kind of reviews her history of researching the placebo effect. And I want to talk a little bit today about that in general, but specifically about what all this has to do with tinnitus. So in her book, Ellen Langer, who's a psychologist at Harvard, reviews some of her more famous studies. One of the more famous ones, perhaps the most famous one, is a study where they put a number of, I think they were all over 70 or 75-year-old men, I think it was just men, in a house. And they had that house with all the television shows and furniture and everything of 2 decades earlier. And they told the men that they should converse as if they were actually in that previous time frame. And after, I think it was a week, you can check this out by yourself. After a week, all these physical symptoms and all these physical signs improved. Better health, better hearing, not just psychological health, which improved as well, but physical symptoms improved in a way that could not be explained by anything other than the capacity of the mind to influence the body. Another study, one I liked, was a study where they told maids at hotels, they took 2 groups of maids, told one of them that the exercise, the work they were doing essentially was aerobic exercise, and that they didn't need to do any more exercise because they were getting, the equivalent of, an hour and a half exercise a day. They sat them down and gave them psychoeducation about this, and another group they just didn't tell anything to, the control group. And after, again, a certain period of time, many of the markers of health improved among those who were told that their work was exercise as compared to those who weren't told this. No difference in their physical activity levels, anything, except what they believed. The power of what you believe is astounding. I can't even scratch the surface here. But I will talk about this with respect to tinnitus because there is some interesting research along this lines. In the 80s, there was a paper, and I'll put a link to it in the notes for this video, that there was some research working with lidocaine, and it showed to be effective in reducing tinnitus. And so they had a group of people who had gotten the lidocaine and told them they were going to get another injection, and gave them the injection, but in fact it was just a water or saline solution. Nonetheless, 40% of the people who got that saline solution reported feeling significantly better, reduced tinnitus sound, based only on getting a saline solution. So the only thing that could explain it was their beliefs about what was happening to them. the placebo effect is tremendously powerful. And many medications and trials have a hard time beating placebos, which is why one of the standards that they have to do is beat a placebo, and a lot of them can't do that. There was at the last year's Tinnitus conference a presenter, I think it was Martin Jensen, who went after one of these types of biofeedback that was shown to be very promising in reducing tinnitus and tinnitus distress. It had people being hooked up to all this equipment and having them work with their brain waves, and they could look on the screen and see what was happening. And this was showing real promise in reducing tinnitus distress. But what he did was hook up people, did the exact same mechanism, but worked with brain waves that had nothing to do with, no one believed they had anything to do with tinnitus, and had people work with these brain waves. And they got essentially the same results as the people who were working with the brain waves that influenced our perception of tinnitus. He speculated that it was all this, expensive equipment and the feeling that you were getting some new technology that resulted in the reduction in tinnitus, perceived tinnitus and tinnitus distress. So this is something to be aware of in whatever treatment you're going. And what I want to kind of highlight here is not, beware of the placebo of the placebo effect, but actually how to utilize the placebo effect. It's such a powerful tool. We want to bring it to our condition, and this is something. This is essentially from Ellen Langer's book, The Mindful Body. She wants to have a tool where we could use the power of the placebo in our own lives, in our own conditions. I mean, one of the catches it's seen with placebos is that you had to be deceived in order for them to work, and there's a real big ethical issue in that, right? Being deceived. And if you tell people it seems the placebo doesn't work, but she points to some research where people knew they were getting a placebo and it was still effective as the basis for a strategy to suggest if you're working with any chronic condition to try this strategy. And I'm going to sketch it out here, but you might want to look in her book, The Mindful Body, to get the full details of this method. But it essentially involves kind of charting your symptoms over a period of time, say a week or a couple weeks, noticing what causes differences in the symptoms. You might notice an activity causes an uptick in tinnitus, or another activity causes it to reduce, or maybe some food or drink works it either way. What we're really looking for is what reduces the tinnitus. We really don't want to increase tinnitus, but if we can associate in our mind certain activities that reduce the tinnitus distress or seem to reduce the sound of the tinnitus, and it's really unimportant whether the activity does or does not reduce the distress. There's probably very little reason to believe what we do has much impact on the tinnitus. But if we can tell ourselves the story that, this going for a walk always reduces my tinnitus, and come to believe that, that's a very powerful tool in working with your tinnitus. So she sketches this as a way to bring the placebo effect into whatever your condition, whatever condition you're working with. She doesn't mention tinnitus, but there's no reason why it wouldn't work with tinnitus. To look for symptom variability, try to determine the cause, and then use that information going forward. And what you're essentially doing in this case is creating your own placebo effect by telling yourself, regardless of the evidence, and you're not doing a scientific blind study on whether this has a positive impact on your tinnitus, but you're just noticing, this impacts my tinnitus, and running with it and seeing if doing it on a regular basis can have an impact. Now, what we know about, again, the placebo effect and the power of the mind is that the story we tell ourselves is incredibly important. If I can tell myself over time that an act or an activity or something decreases my tinnitus, and come to believe that, this may have a very powerful effect on my perception of the tinnitus. And when it comes to tinnitus, what else is there except my perception of the tinnitus? So that's kind of a sketch of the idea. Maybe that's enough for you to implement it. You might want to go to Ellen Langer's book, The Mindful Body, to get a little more clarity and specificity about how to work this. But, try it out. What do you got to lose?